some of the common foods that people are consuming that they think are healthy, but actually are not?
This is where I think we all get confused by the surround sound of marketing of things that are supposedly healthy. And I think that you can think about like diet sodas being better than regular sugar sweetened sodas. Not true. Diet sodas with artificial sweeteners damage our gut health, which then damages our metabolism, which can actually have tremendous impact in our body's metabolism. Another one is fruit juice. Look, I enjoy drinking the taste of fruit juice, but when you guzzle fruit juice, which many people do, it's a problem. I'll give you an example. I love oranges, especially when they're in season during the winter. I love eating a regular juicy sweet orange. I love all the fiber that's in it. I love the taste of the whole orange. And it's very sweet. But a single orange is very nutrient dense. I could guzzle, it would take me a few minutes to eat an orange, but I could guzzle down a tall glass of orange juice, which it would take 8 oranges to make in 30 seconds, right? And so that's an example of where you can easily overload the sugars, the fruit sugars, by having a tall glass of its juice instead of eating the whole fruit. So that's an example, like lots of fruit juices. And some of the fruit juices you get in a store are also sweetened. And so people don't check the ingredients to look at all those other additives that are in there as well. We know that coffee and tea are also healthy beverages, but if you take a look at some of the flavored coffees, the drive-throughs, you get handed that special seasonal version with the pumpkin or whatever. A lot of those flavors, as tasty as they may be, I even like them. They're artificial. They're artificially flavored, artificially sweetened, and that also takes something that's healthy and makes it, frankly, not just less healthy, but actually unhealthy. Another example would be plant-based foods. The plant-based burgers that they talked about that everyone says is a healthier version than a regular burger. Well, look, we know that ultra-processed foods that you buy anywhere are not good for our overall health. And in fact, it compromises our metabolism when we eat too many ultra-processed foods. And although something that might be plant-based sounds healthy, in fact, when it's ultra-processed, it winds up being something less than healthy and falls squarely in the box of ultra-processed foods. And so it's sort of a bit of buyer beware. Be careful about not being snowed by the marketing messages that are out there. Understand what we're looking for in terms of healthy foods, and kind of exclude everything that's not.
Yeah, I appreciate you outlining some of those common foods there. As you were talking there, Dr. Lee, the word that came up for me was nuance. There's a bit of nuance here. Tea and coffee are healthy drinks. For most people, lots of these blue zones around the world are consuming tea, coffee, and water as their main drinks, as you write about in your new book. But they're not probably putting in the syrups and all the flavors and all the things. So coffee can be healthy for some people in the right dose at the right time, potentially can turn into something quite unhealthy depending on what you're putting in it. And this whole idea of ingredient labels, I think, is something that will come up time and time again. You write about this beautifully in your book. What about something like bread? I think bread fits into this. Bread is one of those foods that is consumed all over the world, but there are probably some breads that for some people are health promoting, whereas others are not so good, are they?
It's so true. I'm glad you brought up the idea of bread. I actually think of bread and wine as two categories of foods that date back to the origins of our humanity, right? So basically, when humans started to put together their societies thousands of years ago, we fermented grapes, we made bread. They're some of the elemental foods that characterize sort of human society from a cultural sense. And one of the things that I think is quite challenging is, first, the quality of the ingredient that goes into the product. So for bread, as an example, the least expensive, softest, longest lasting breads that you can buy in the grocery store, in the supermarkets, are the ones that are made with the lowest quality flour and that have lots of other preservatives added to it to allow it to kind of survive the centuries. Like some of these breads probably could stay intact in a pyramid, for thousands of years. I kid you not. And yet those are some of the cheapest ones that people are accustomed to, maybe from childhood. Our mom might have fed us this and made our sandwiches out of this, and we become accustomed to having cheap bread. That's one thing, is the quality of the grain used for something as elemental as bread. Second is really that, whether we're having whole grain or whether actually ultra processed flour can also make a difference. There's lots of different types of grains that can be used to make bread. And then, of course, there are some historically important breads like sourdough, which in fact has microbiome, probiotic starters that are good for our gut health. For example, like Lactobacillus reuteri, it happens to be one of the starters. It's found in our gut bacteria. It's actually developed over the centuries of humans making sourdough bread generation after generation to develop its own probiotic bacteria that grows right in the bread itself, in the little dough that gets pinched and saved from baker to baker and passed down through the generations. So I think that there's also nuance, as you say. And then, of course, there's something that's maybe less nuanced, which is volume. A little bread probably is just fine. But eating bread the way that we are often served bread or accustomed to eating bread, which is wolfing down large quantities of bread, that clearly, like anything else that is consumed in excess, definitely can compromise our health.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. It's interesting what you said there about quantity. This is something I've learned about in my own life, not necessarily dealing with patients, of course. That's taught me a lot over the years. But I have experimented with wearing a CGM for a couple of weeks, a few times a year, not all the time, but now and again. And I have learned, whether it's white rice or bread, the quantity makes a huge difference on the impact it has on my body. And so that device for me has been a really great learning tool to go, hey, if you want to enjoy this, you can, but if you want it to not cause long-term health consequences, maybe just go easy on the volume and the amounts. And you know what? I probably changed the amount I was consuming. Let's say white rice, for example. Let's say I'm going to have white rice in the evening with my meal, which I grew up in an Indian family. It's a food that I grew up eating, but I can actually have a really small amount now and enjoy it and actually not see it impact my blood sugar. So that's been really quite amazing for me. Have you experienced things like this yourself as well? And I guess, is that what you're getting at with quantity?
Yes. I mean, I'm so glad you brought the continuous glucose monitoring as a non-invasive way for us to measure ourselves. I mean, this, and I think this is where the future is going, giving us the ability relatively easily to see how we're doing from moment to moment, day to day, is super helpful. For me, a simple device that I've actually experimented with, similar to, is I don't know if you've seen these. It's like a breathalyzer for whether you're burning carbs or fat. It's called a Lumen device.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting. The fact that it breaks down a respiratory equivalent for your metabolism just through a breathalyzer. If a policeman can pull you over to the side of the road for drinking too much alcohol, why can't we actually be at home and measure in the morning, as I sometimes do occasionally, just to check in to see how I've been done? And to your point, exactly. I found that when I'm actually moderate and mindful in what I consume, not only in terms of what, but also the quantity of how much I ate, I actually do better. And that's actually a positive reinforcement. So, I think these little signals that actually help us get smarter about our own behavior and what's good for us, it's not a big ask. It's actually a very easy thing to do.
Yeah. It's interesting what we've just been talking about, how we might be able to use tech or, all kinds of things, blood tests, whatever it might be, to actually learn what's working for us and what's not working for us. I think really speaks to the message in your new book, which is very much one of personalization. You've done a beautiful job at outlining, I think, 150 plus foods in that book, right? These foods are going to help you burn fats, they're going to help you lose weight, give you more energy, whatever it might be you're looking for, these foods are going to help you. But you really beautifully put across this idea, which I'm a huge fan of, that you have to personalize this for you. If some of those foods on that list you don't like or don't fit you and your culture and your upbringing, that's okay. You know, there's other foods you can focus on. And, you know, you're not prescribing an actual diet per se in this book. More, I think, a way of eating. And you're trying to help people with, I guess, some base principles. I think you say in the book, actually, Dr. Lee, that you prefer people to be mindful eaters rather than prescriptive eaters.
100%. I think one of the things that makes diets fail, and by the way, my title of my new book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, is a trick title purposefully. It's not a diet book. It's actually an anti-diet book, which is why it's called Eat to Beat Your Diet. The science tells us that if we eat mindfully and if we make good choices and we actually think about the volume, sort of what we eat and how we eat, we can use the equipment, the hardwiring, the operating system that's in our bodies to be able to work on our behalf without going to these extreme fad interventions, fad diets. I mean, as you now know, it goes crazy when we're a society obsessed with weight loss, whether it's prescription drugs for weight loss or whether it's sucking out fat from your cheeks. There's lots and lots of intense things that people do. The problem is, they don't last. And for me, a healthy diet is something that you can is sustainable. You can enjoy it. It can become second nature. And I think one of the things that I also want to add to your idea of just the opposite of prescriptive diet and a more natural personalized diet is aligning your life patterns, your eating patterns with what gives you joy. Because food, is different from supplements or medicines. We talk about food as medicine. Yes, food is medicine, but food is in so many ways, but yet food is not medicine because nobody gets joy from actually taking a medicine. If I wrote a prescription or you wrote a prescription and you gave me a prescription and I went to the pharmacy to fill it out and I started taking the pills or I went to a hospital to get an infusion, I guarantee you it's not going to give me joy. But if we were to have a conversation about foods that can actually activate and elevate our body's natural processes to help us become healthier, and we can pick among those food ingredients and combine them in ways that are delicious and do bring us joy, that's something that would be wonderful to be able to adopt. And that, to me, is what's important.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very clear from reading this book and your previous one, to be fair, that you are a foodie, that you enjoy cooking, you enjoy observing different cultures, you like putting it all together. So there's a real joy, I think, in reading the book because your love of food absolutely comes through really beautifully. There's quite a lot of new science in there. A lot of the time I feel people think, well, we know everything there is to know now. We just need to do the things that people are telling us. And while some of the principles, I guess, we know about, there's quite a few areas of science around metabolism and brown fats, which I felt were really, really interesting that I'd love to explore with you. Before we get to that, I wonder if we can talk about gut health and weight loss, and in particular, fat loss. You've touched on it a couple of times already in terms of the probiotics within certain breads. One of the foods you mentioned at the start, which can be problematic, was diet soft drinks. And again, a lot of people will say, well, why, Dr. Lee? Surely that's better than my sugar-sweetened soft drink. And this all kind of speaks to gut health. So I wonder if you could talk to these themes a little bit and help people understand what that relationship is.
Right. Well, gut health is something that, we live with gut health until our gut's unhealthy, right? All of us have experienced this. We feel perfectly fine. We don't think about our gut health until we have that crampy, bloated, gassy, uncomfortable feeling. That's our body, our gut telling us there's something wrong in the neighborhood of those 39 trillion bacteria living in our cecum, which is really the final part of our colon. And the thing that is really remarkable is what these gut bacteria do for us when it comes to our metabolism. Well, we're just beginning to peel back the layers of the onion to discover how important gut health is for our metabolism. For example, we know that a properly functioning neighborhood ecosystem of gut bacteria, our microbiome, as we know, actually makes our body's ability to use insulin and to absorb glucose more efficient. Now, let me just put that in the context for your listeners in terms of something that they probably have heard about, but maybe didn't connect with gut health. So every time we eat food, we put it in our mouth, our pancreas releases a hormone called insulin. And that insulin, combined with the food that we've absorbed through our stomach into our bloodstream, draws the energy into our cells so that we're actually able to use that energy from the food we eat in order to power our body. Now, our gut bacteria actually helps to contribute to how smooth that process is. When our gut bacteria is unhealthy, the ecosystem is disturbed. Think about how easy it is to disturb a beautiful pond in your backyard. If you were to take a gallon of dish soap and just start pouring it into the pond, you're going to start poisoning some of the tadpoles and the frogs and the natural wildlife there, and the pond is not going to be healthy. That's basically what happens when we consume things like diet sodas. It's been shown now that many of those artificial sweeteners, non-nutritive sweeteners, when we consume them, alter our gut microbiome. They change the neighborhood. And how do we know that this actually has an impact on our metabolism? We know this from clinical studies because, ironically, even though people drink diet sodas so they don't gain weight with sugar, ironically, many people do gain weight if they consume enough diet soda. So if you poison your gut microbiome sufficiently and you disrupt your metabolism sufficiently, even though you're having, quote, diet soda, that's just a name on the can. The reality is that we're actually changing the biology in our body in such a way that our body's actually going to start to grow body fat and use our food, our fuel source, much less efficiently. So many other things can actually disturb our gut health as well. Antibiotics, which are so commonly prescribed, overprescribed perhaps might be the right word to say in many societies. I think that overconsumption of alcohol can clearly interfere with your gut microbiome. Ultra-processed foods, all those things, back to reading the ingredient label, that we don't do enough. I mean, honestly, it's not a big deal to pick up something that you might put in your shopping cart, but just take a moment before it goes in to turn the box to the side and look at what's actually inside it. If you don't recognize those ingredients, if you can't pronounce them, think, are these ingredients potentially impacting my gut health, my gut microbiome? And if so, could that have an adverse effect on my metabolism? That is something that we should all be thinking about as we just cruise through the shopping, through the supermarket, putting things into our cart.
Yeah.
Hi there. If you enjoyed watching this video, I know you'll love the next one. Stay here and check it out, and I'll see you there.